Otis is the newest brawler coming into the new Brawl Stars update, and today we are going to test him against every other brawler in Brawl Stars. Otis is a mid to long range brawler that has a high damage output. He shoots 3 paintballs that deal 690 damage each, but you can equip his second star power to give you 4 shots instead of 3. And to top that off, he has an insane super that silences enemies for a full 3 seconds. Now you could use his first star power, which extends the duration of that silence, but as you'll see in this video, you don't really need the extra time. Let's start this off against the throwers. As you would expect, he slaughters the throwers in base level interactions. He absolutely demolishes them all, and some of them never even get a shot that does damage because they're dead before then. But in an actual game scenario, throwers are one of the strongest brawlers against him. Let me explain. The only real way Otis can displace them is by using his second gadget, and with this gadget, his next shot will fire a large paintball that leaves a puddle and it deals 810 damage per second. This puddle will pass through walls and make a thrower at least leave their place for a little while, but it doesn't last too long, so they can just go right on back to doing what throwers do. Now, Otis has 5,700 hit points, and while that's not really tanky, it's respectable. In base level interactions, he has a fair showing against the real powerhouses. Brawlers like Bull can 2-shot him, and that's not a big surprise, but what is a surprise is that not every tank can beat him straight up in a 1v1 toe-to-toe. Brawlers like BB and Rosa fail to take him out despite the health discrepancy, and surprisingly enough, the tankiest brawler in the game, Frank, only wins by a few hit points even with a sponge star power. However, this all changes when you start to factor in his super, and this super is absolutely cracked. He goes from very strong to the Brawl Stars incarnation of Jesus because his super is a silence that locks a brawler out for a full 3 seconds from performing any action whatsoever except running. No gadgets, no supers, no shots. And if you're close to Otis and he supers you, you're basically dead because he can cycle those supers pretty quickly as well. And while this super cannot interrupt any action that has already started, against Frank in an actual game, it can still prevent you from being killed by him even after he has landed his super on you if you're able to get that silence off before you're stunned. Similarly, you can silence a brawler if they are supering towards you. If Bull is charging right at you, simply silence him and he arrives at your feet ready to give you a power cube. Daryl repeats this story. Sure, he may win the 1v1 interaction, but if he rolls up on you and you silence him, you win. Ash's damage is basically on par with Otis, and if he's charging you, you build that super up and you shut him down. In the same fashion, Fane gets dumped on. Sure, he can super right next to you, but you can't do anything once you get there. Plain and simple, it boils down to this. You can beat Otis without his super, but with it, you don't stand a snowball's chance in hell. So you might be thinking that spawners should do well against Otis then. Well, in basic 1v1 interactions, they all lose. Now, Mr. P fares the best because both the main shot and his bounce deal damage. I mean, he still loses, but at least it's close. The other spawners get beat pretty well. Now, I hear you. What about their spawns though? Well, Otis can silence them as well. That's right, you can shut down Scrappy, Bruce, or even Mr. P's Porter Station with Otis's super. I mean, I'm not saying that that's the best use of that silence, but it's possible. Now, of the spawners, the best counter is probably Eve. Now, I know she's not your traditional idea of a spawner, but her super does spawn 3 hatchlings, so we're gonna go with it. Not only can Eve move over water, but her range makes her a suitable counter out in the open. If you can keep your range as Eve, even if you get hit with a silence, you're not in big trouble. Now, with only 5,700 hit points, you would expect Otis to get slaughtered by the assassins, right? Well, not so much. Otis unloads his shots very fast, so he can output damage as fast as them. Even Leon, who does insane damage up close, loses in a base level 1v1 interaction. Think about that for a second. Leon, up close, beaten. In a real game scenario, brawlers like Mortis would do pretty well as long as he picked his spots when Otis was either out of shots or didn't have his super. If not, he's at a disadvantage, or at least it's a very close fight. But you see, Otis has another trick up his sleeve for the assassins, and that is his second gadget called the Dormant Star. Now, with this gadget, you can use your super, and if it doesn't hit something, it will stay on the ground, and the next enemy that walks over it will be silenced. Similar to Bell, you can't see this on the ground if you're an enemy, and there can be up to 3 of these Dormant Stars laying on the ground at once at any time. How this would work is you could place this on the ground if you're in fear about being attacked by an assassin. Then you could stay near it, and if they pounce on you, they're going to be silenced. And as we've seen, if you get silenced up close by Otis, you're dead. Now, Edgar does beat Otis with his fisticuff star power toe-to-toe. However, I would be really wary of jumping on an Otis if you're an Edgar. That is, unless he just uses super, because you will absolutely get shut down if that super is in hand, or even near. With Buzz, it's basically the same story as Bull and some of the other tanks. Now, one note is that you can use your silence on Buzz as he is supering to you. The stun will go off. However, doing so, much like Frank, this will save your life and give you time to get away. But what if you could heal through all that damage that Otis is putting out? Decent question, so let's take a look at the healers. Now, in a base level interaction, Poco gets absolutely slaughtered, and Byron, as we all know, is horrible in these 1v1 scenarios, but we also know that these interactions are just the most basic of interactions. They don't take into account maps, modes, team comps, gadgets, supers, or, most importantly, player skill, which is one reason why I'm doing this video differently than the others before. In an actual game, Poco is probably still going to get dumped on if he's facing off against Otis and they're both within range of each other. That is, of course, assuming Otis hits his shots. Byron, however, will do vastly better because he outranges Otis. If there's a wide open space and Byron can hit shots and keep his range, he will do very well against Otis. The only other healer here is Pam, and she dominates Otis in a toe-to-toe battle because of her insane damage output and her high health pool. This is, of course, assuming that Otis doesn't have the Great Equalizer. Unless Pam has her super already down, she's going to be in big trouble if she faces an Otis up close. She's more of a mid-range tanky healer, but I think that she's going to do pretty decent against him. But what about the other mid-range brawlers? Well, that's where things get worse for pretty much all mid-range characters. Almost every single mid-range brawler loses in a 1v1 interaction against Otis. Almost every single one of them. Lola? She's dead. Lou? Demolished. Sandy? Not even close. Surge? Nope. Spike? He got cactused. And yes, I just made that word up. Squeak? Not a chance. Max? How about Ruffs? Well, he got sent to the doghouse. And Janet? Well, she left first class and is now in coach. Even Ems, with her bad karma star power in the max damage zone, still goes down. Now, Bo is a close one, and that could be an interesting matchup. Otis not only beats these brawlers in a 1v1 interaction, but he's going to be at a big advantage in a game scenario as well. His shots unload fast, he has a good amount of health, and that's not even counting his silence. I mean, listen, if you're looking for a big winner in the mid-range brawler category, the only one here that shines is Griff. He has massive damage and easily wins the base level interaction. However, Griff likes to get up close and personal to deal maximum damage with his coins as well as that deadly super. But if we're going to have supers in play, no one, and I mean no one, is going to beat a 3-second lockout of all abilities, and Griff is no exception. There are 2 mid-range brawlers that I can see doing pretty well in a game, and that is Tara and Stu. And that's only if the Stu player is skilled. Now, Tara might do pretty decent because if she gets her super off, then Otis doesn't have time to silence her, as well as he will have to deal with the shade in the middle before getting to Tara. I can see this leading to some silenced Tara pets and ultimately a Otis death. So at this point, you're probably wondering who the heck can beat Otis? Well, there is one class of brawlers that performs the best against him. Well, I mean, sort of. Now let's get this out of the way right off the top. In base level interactions, Otis absolutely smashes almost all of the long range brawlers. Even Piper hitting full damage shots, it's not enough. Rico has way too little health and too long of an unload speed to do very much, and B gets absolutely vaporized. Belle gets her health absolutely robbed, and Meg gets beat easily in human form. The only one who really puts up a fight here are Nani and Colt. Now Nani, if she hits all 3 orbs, wins by a fraction of a second, and Colt loses by the same split second even though his raw damage output is higher than Otis. Brock may have the moves, but it's still not enough to best a 3-foot-tall deep sea diver. And Gene may be able to tickle him from a distance, but in range of Otis, he gets smacked. And I know what you're thinking, but don't even try pulling Otis with a super, because I think we both know how that would end. The only brawler here that wins convincingly in a 1v1 interaction is 8-Bit, and that's because of his huge health pool and high damage. So why then do I say that the long-range brawlers have the best chance against Otis? It's kind of right there in the name. The range. If a long-range brawler can keep that range and hit their shots, they'll be able to do just fine. However, if you miss some shots and allow him to get inside of your range, or, heaven forbid, up close, then you're going to be in a world of hurt. But all things being equal, which of course they never are, but if they were, the long-range brawlers are the only brawlers in Brawl Stars that actually have an advantage against Otis, and that's an advantage that can be erased really quickly if you miss some shots. So you've seen Otis in action against every brawler, and if you haven't guessed by now, then I'll just straight up tell you, Otis is the strongest brawler that I have ever seen come into the game. He absolutely shuts down tanks. He dominates the mid-range brawlers and assassins, and unless you're a really good sharpshooter, you're going to meet a similar fate as the others. The biggest problem here is Otis's super, his silence. It's absolutely bonkers. Like, this is a technical term for you, but Otis is nutty cuckoo's bananas good. I mean, he just is. He has the potential to be the most dominant brawler I have ever seen in Brawl Stars. Full stop. That being said, I wouldn't be surprised if he got some nerfs soon after he is released, so enjoy him while you can.